Hi all. In preparation for Easter, a number of Christians across the world have been sharing their stories of how Jesus changed their life, along with the hashtag Jesus changed my life. And so I wanted to just share with my friends and family on social media how Jesus has changed my life. So for me, I grew up in a Christian home, but when I was in about grade 8, I began to wonder, is this all really true? Can I trust what the Bible says? And I was fortunate to be in a really good school, a Christian school. I had some really great teachers who were able to not only point me to resources, about God in science, God in history, God in ethics, but also to really challenge me to think critically and to truly think for myself. And so, as a result of that, I began to really see, and since that point up into high school, I continued to just read and really look and search and be like, is this true? And so, I came to a place where I really believed that, Christianity was the most intellectually satisfying answer to a lot of life's big questions. And so not only did I come to see that, there's reasonable answers for, God in creation, the creation of the world, but also for big questions that I think a lot of people don't necessarily ask, such as, about morality or, the concepts of, human dignity. Like, why do we have a sense that humans are valuable? Why do we desire meaning? And so all these big questions, I found that Christianity had a satisfying answer for them. And so I had this intellectual understanding of Christianity, and I believe that it was true. But at the same time, I didn't fully want all of its claims to be applied to my life, because that would mean I would have to change my life in some of the ways that I was living. And so since I was about 15, I had ended up in a number of bad relationships with guys who were a lot older than me, who did not share my Christian values, and it was messy and it was empty. But through that time, I I still believed in God. I was still pursuing him, I would say. I was still involved in my church. I still said that I loved God. However, I wasn't truly accepting God as Lord of my life. And so when I reached this point where I was just these years where I was in all these different relationships they were the emptiest, the barest, just the worst years of my life. And I was trying to do things my own way, do life my own way. I kept going back to these relationships for fulfillment, for the feeling of the short-term excitement that they brought. But every time it was empty. And I finally got to this point where I'm just I don't want to live like this anymore. And I started to see that what a verse in the Bible, John 14:15 says is true, where it says, if we love God, we'll also obey him. And I realized I intellectually believed in God and I valued him, but I didn't obey him, and I hadn't actually given my life fully to him. And so around this time, I decided, if I'm really into this, if I'm really a Christian, I have to give myself fully to this Christianity thing. And so I decided that I need to truly give everything to God. I also realized for the first time that I wasn't a good person. On my own, I could not be good. I had tried. I always fall back to my sinful ways of living, just going back to these ugly things that I would do, and I would hurt people, I'd hurt myself, and it was miserable. And I kept thinking I can get over this, I'm going to be better, and I never could. And so the Bible says that the wages of sin is death, and before a perfect and righteous God, that is what I deserved. But the Bible also says that Jesus, who knew no sin, took our sin on himself. And so, God's standard is perfection because he's righteous and he's good. And I was not perfect. I realized I can never achieve this on my own. In fact, left to my own devices, I'm just going to continue to go back to these things that hurt me and hurt other people. But the awesome news is that Jesus paid that penalty for the debt. And anyone who accepts that free gift is made right with God. And it's not about, it wasn't about anything that I did. I'm not a good person in myself. But, Jesus began to change me. And not only did he begin to change my outlook on the world, he began to change my desires. And I began to truly want to live a life that pleased God. And I realized that living God's way actually is the best way. And, shortly after, or sometime after, not shortly, I decided that I really just needed to give my life fully to God. I met my husband, George, and it was just like night and day difference between the other relationships that I had been living, and just doing relationships God's way and like honoring God as both Christians who are just wanting to honor God in the way that God said to do relationships. And we've been married for 3 years now, and it's awesome. And but even George, he's not meant to be the one who fulfills me. And it's awesome doing things God's way, but really it is ultimately Christ alone who gives me meaning, and who makes my life worth living. And I'm still far from perfect, but God is so good, and Jesus changes everything.